We are only 5 days away from this election, and the nominees are going all out on the campaign trails. They are attacking each other. They're focusing on the issues as well. So how have you, the voter, been responding to what they're doing? Lee Carter is the president and a partner at Melansky and Partners, and she has brand new dials for us. Good morning to you, Lee.
Good morning.
So the FBI, we have sources that are saying that she possibly could get indicted, but she says there's no case here. She's been saying that on the campaign trail. Watch this, and guys at home, watch what the independents think about what she says, because that's the good indication of what's going to happen in this election. That's the yellow line.
For those of you who are concerned about my using personal email, I understand, and as I've said, I'm not making excuses. I've said it was a mistake and I regret it, and now they apparently want to look at emails of one of my staffers, and by all means, they should look at them. And I am sure they will reach the same conclusion they did when they looked at my emails for the last year. There is no case here.
So, Lee, what did the people say that you were polling about that?
So you can see Democrats gave it a B, Independents a C-, and Republicans an F. And you can just see that it just didn't necessarily resonate with folks who seemed defensive.
Well, Donald Trump has said, you know, she can blame whoever she wants for this email thing, but it is really her fault. Listen to what he said and watch the dials.
Hillary wants to blame everyone else for her mounting legal troubles, but she has brought all of this on herself. Hillary is the one who set up an illegal private email server in a closet to shield her criminal activity. Hillary is the one who engaged in a corrupt pay-for-play scheme at the State Department. And now there are 5 FBI probes into the Clinton Foundation and their pay-for-play activities.
You can see Republicans loved it. It was off the charts. The independents were pretty high on that, too.
They were. Republicans off the charts, they gave it an A+. Independents a B, while the Democrats, obviously this didn't resonate. But what we're finding, the more specific he is, the better the attack. When he's focused on Hillary, when he gives those specifics, people respond. They've got a lot of questions right now.
All right, good deal. Thank you so much, Lee.
Great to be here.
For any Democratic voter, and who are having a bad case of buyer's remorse, you can change your vote to Donald Trump.
Well, with just 5 days to go, Donald Trump appeals to voters in the state of Wisconsin, asking them to change their votes if they voted for Hillary, as Hillary Clinton maintains her lead in that state. But a new Marquette Law School poll shows a neck-and-neck race for the state Senate seat. So is the Badger State in play here? Well, here to weigh in on this is Fox News contributor and the wife of Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy, Rachel Compost Duffy. Good to see you, Rachel. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Ainsley.
You're welcome. All right, have you had any friends that voted for Hillary Clinton and have decided to change their vote, or do you know anyone who has done this in your state?
No, I don't personally know anyone who's done that, but Donald Trump was in Wisconsin just a couple days ago reminding people that if they have buyer's remorse, they can change their vote right here in Wisconsin. And, you know, that bombshell that dropped on Friday has really made a difference in this race. I mean, the Marquette poll said that 75% of the Wisconsin voters have said that it is going to make a difference in their vote, and they are very concerned about it. So I think it's a bit of a game changer.
Let's talk about the Senate race, because Ron Johnson is the current senator, and he is running against Russ Feingold. They are neck and neck. Look at that poll right there. It shows that Russ Feingold is getting 45%, Ron Johnson 44%. Now, the Dems thought they had it in the bag in your state, so why are they neck and neck now?
Well, first of all those consultants in Washington were just wrong. When we were here on the ground, we knew this race was going to be a lot tighter, and it's showing that it is. Listen, Obamacare has made a big difference in this. Russ Feingold was a big supporter of it. He made all the promises to the voters that Obamacare was going to let them keep their health care and their doctors, and he was a very big deciding vote on Obamacare, and Ron Johnson's holding that against him. He's got great ads on Obamacare, and so I think that's playing big. But listen, that bombshell again on Friday is another big reason people want to have a check on the Clintons in case they win this election. And you know, listen, that Marquette poll shows that Wisconsin is a six-point race. I think it's much closer than that, although I know that the Marquette poll is notoriously known for being a very good poll. In this case, I think that it's a little tighter because, look, they oversampled Democrats by 6 points. This is a purple state, not a +6 Democrat state. And also, part of the sampling, they were in the field before the bombshell hit, so it hasn't captured exactly how dissatisfied and
Rachel, we're going to see what happens. Thanks so much for joining us. Sorry to interrupt you. Kelly Conway's coming up. Thank you. We got to run.
Well, with 5 days before the election, nobody better to talk about the Donald Trump campaign than the woman who's actually running it. Kellyanne Conway joins us live.
Thank you.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How about these Brett Baier details last night? He's got two sources inside the FBI. If you're just joining us, here are the highlights. The investigation's been going for over a year, handled by the White Collar Crime Division. Those two laptops.
Clinton Foundation.
Into the Clinton Foundation.
We have to keep our FBI investigations at Hillary Street.
Right. The two laptops from the aides, they are not destroyed. They're now going through it. Apparently, an indictment is possible into the Clinton Foundation pay-for-place scam.
And an avalanche of new information every day.
And a 99% chance that apparently her email server was hacked by at least 5 foreign governments. Where do you want to start?
Well, where do we start? I just don't want Americans to feel that, you know, I don't know how this affects me. Why should I care? You should care very much because you've already gotten a clear view into what Hillary Clinton's presidency would look like, her administration. She's simply unfit and unqualified to be president. We already know what's happened at the State Department, using it as a concierge for foreign donations, and then turning around and allowing access by individuals who don't really have official State Department business but want to give money to the Clinton Foundation. Why should people care about that? Because the Clinton Foundation then turned around and allowed Bill Clinton to make, what, $66 million we read, get contributions like $28 million from Morocco. Uranium One, I think, is becoming a household term now, Steve, in terms of people understanding that
Russia has our access to
uranium. And so this is somebody who has already proven how she would handle classified information, confidential information, and frankly how she handles lying about lying. That's the difficulty here. And look, I think you said 99% chance that 5 different foreign nations hacked. I think there's a 100% chance that all this scandalabra is catching up with her in the polls. I mean, you see we're really competitive. Scandalabra. You see that we're really catching her in these blue states like Colorado, tied today.
Tied at 39.
Tied at 39, according to, and this is a woman who I always say, Brian, can't get past 46%. It turns out in some of these states she can't get past 42%. In states that President Obama carried with well over 50% of the vote. That's really the key here.
Totally a different election this week than just last week after they reopened this investigation on Friday. What does this all mean for Donald Trump because he only has 5 more days left?
What it means for the voters, Ainsley, is that they're going to look at the closing arguments of these two candidates. And Hillary Clinton has gone lower and lower and lower. She's gone full-on negative, 100%. Even Joe Biden, President Obama, they're out there attacking Donald Trump. Her closing argument is a long way away from the man from hope, the audacity of hope. You know, it's the audacity of Hillary now. And it's basically all they know because they have had a structure in place in the 8 years since she lost the presidency the first time of how would we run focus groups, polling, messaging, how do we hide this information, how do we reach this group, and they just are simply unprepared for the news of the day. And so I think they're flailing. The Democratic messaging is all over the place, and somehow somebody thinks it's a good idea to go after Director Comey. It's a terrible idea for her. It's a great idea for us, but you see Donald Trump on message on the stump talking about his love for the country, his love for its people, and folks are starting to realize the difference between these two candidates are many. She went from dead broke to making $250 million, has never taken a company public, didn't hit the Powerball, didn't sell anything, you know, hasn't.
Where'd that money come from?
Where'd that money come from? They're selling access and favors. But in Donald Trump's case, He's a successful businessman. He's an inspirational story to entrepreneurs. He builds things, he fixes things, he solves problems. The other difference between them is who is the consummate Washington insider that cannot claim a mantle to the change that 3/4 of Americans tell the Fox News pollsters they want to make.
When you look at the media, he's definitely the underdog. I mean, look at CNN giving questions in advance to the Democrats. And Donald Trump said if that had happened, if Reince Priebus had given, if Reince Priebus had done that to me, I would have gotten the electric chair.
Well, so I hope he would have fired me if I had done that. Certainly, I certainly would have resigned. But this is how Hillary Clinton has spent her career. It's always Hillary first, cutting corners, being propped up. You know, they say lock her up. I always say prop her up. She's got everybody from the president to the first lady to the vice president to her husband, also happens to be a former president, all out there campaigning for her and propping her up. And she's just so negative. This is not the Democratic Party I grew up in, where it's aspirational, optimistic, forward-looking. It's all cesspool, personal, political destruction by her. And I think it's going to backfire.
I want to talk about strategy if we could. Florida and Ohio, you're doing much better there than Mitt Romney was doing and John McCain was doing. So it's more likely that you'll get them in a column. But if you don't turn a red state blue or a couple of them, you're not going to win. Close, but you're not going to win. Colorado looks like it's in play, tied at 39. Not many people thought that. Where else should we keep an eye on? The last Wisconsin poll, you said, okay, look at Marquette. Marquette poll, which many people respect, has you trailing by 6. So maybe it's not Wisconsin. Where do we look?
Well, look to see where we're deploying our two major assets, Governor Pence and Mr. Trump. And they have been in Wisconsin. They'll be back there. Governor Pence will be in Michigan.
You're not giving
today.
up on Wisconsin.
Nope. And Michigan. Also Colorado, as you mentioned. Also take a look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is known as fool's gold for Republican candidates, but this is a different candidate. His message of trade and illegal immigration and job creation and energy investment in Pennsylvania is huge.
But he hasn't been close there, Kellyanne.
Well, the latest polls have him 3 to 4 points there, and internally we see the same thing. So there's like 4 different polls out now, Susquehanna and a few others, that have him 3 or 4 points. And again, Ryan, what I'm always looking at, I've talked about it on your set before, I always look at 2 things, which is, one, Hillary Clinton just can't bust through that 45, 46% anywhere, and she's nowhere near where President Obama was with 5 days to go in these blue states. Number 2, the undercover Trump voter, it's not that they're embarrassed to say, it's that they've already decided, I want change. But some of them have not been for Donald Trump. They've been against. They've already decided, I don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton for any number of reasons. Now he's making the case of why they should feel comfortable to actually vote for an outsider.
A couple of Republicans are on board. It looks like he's changed his mind, a very powerful talk show host. And Ted Cruz is going to be on the stump from originally, obviously, no, to I'm with Mike Pence and, of course, with Donald Trump. What else have you heard? Can you give us any other names of Republicans that have come on board?
Yes, and you see a number of these congressmen. Frankly, I get a lot of calls from Senate candidate staff because you look at Donald Trump and Mike Pence's margins in states where you have competitive governor's races and Senate races like New Hampshire, North Carolina, Missouri, and Indiana. And Trump is actually running even with or actually ahead, particularly of the gubernatorial candidates. So that in Indiana, that's exciting to those folks. We also we do hear from people who never consider themselves necessarily never Trumpers, but we're trying to figure out how to get there. And they like the fact that Donald Trump looks like a winner, and they realize they don't want the Supreme Court recast in Hillary Clinton's likeness. And they see that he is putting forth issues. I think his Gettysburg, the plan he laid out at Gettysburg for the first 100 days was a big defining point for many of those reluctant Republicans, Brian, because they say, this is something I can get behind. I personally receive calls from members of Congress and candidates who say, I can actually drop bills. I can put legislation forward that supports that 100-day plan.
I heard John Kasich is having second thoughts. He's going to try to recast his vote. Did you hear that?
That would be fine, but we're going to win Ohio without his help.
There you go. Let me ask you this. You know, Donald Trump has only been a politician for about 1.5 years. There's been a learning curve, but right now, and we saw it yesterday, back on message, how would you characterize how he has made this evolution into, right now, they're dead even where he is versus a career politician who's been in the business for 35 years, and here this guy who's brand new at it is tied with her.
He's tied with her because he's not a politician, and he has demonstrated and illustrated exactly what that means. So it means that you can still talk about your success outside of politics. He's a builder, he's a fixer, he solves problems. He's a real inspiration for lots of Americans. And he's employed tens of thousands of people, including women, and elevated them to the highest levels. And I think when people look at that, what have people said to pollsters for decades? I'd like somebody outside of politics to run for politics. I'd like somebody who doesn't owe anybody anything in Washington, D.C., is not part of the insider's game. And they never really get their chance at the presidential level. If you look at the congressional level, they do tend to vote for folks who it's their first run. They say, I can't stand on the sidelines anymore. I actually have to put myself out there. It's never really happened at the presidential
level. And he's opening the door for other people to do this down the road, as well as Hillary Clinton. It's just unprecedented.
Exactly.
It's been
but I think it's a huge contrast, a real choice election, if you will, this time. Certainly in substance, also in style, but also in background. So this is people's chance. I mean, the one polling statistic we've looked at internally all along that I think has been missed in so much of the public polling until recently is the dynamism with which you look at anywhere from 15% to 28% in these swing states. The number of people who say, I don't want to continue with the same policies we've had, but they weren't yet voting for Donald Trump. They're unfavorable towards Hillary. They want to break with the past policies, but they weren't yet there. And I think the excuse to vote against Hillary has now married up with the reason to vote for Donald Trump, and you're seeing that reflected in the polls. We're going to win. I hope you'll be there election night.
Thank you so much.
Victory.
All right.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks for having me.
The investigation into Hillary Clinton's secret server takes a sinister turn now as we learn it was reportedly hacked by at least 5 foreign intel agencies, giving them access to the United States and all of our secrets and then putting American lives at risk.
Here for reaction is the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Republican Congressman down in Texas, Michael McCall. Good morning to you, Chairman.
Morning, Steve.
Okay, so Brett Baer's got a couple of sources inside the FBI that says with 99% accuracy, Hillary Clinton and the Clinton server was hacked by at least 5 foreign agencies and the information was taken from it. Doesn't that, if she's elected President of the United States, doesn't that really open up President Clinton to blackmail by these 5 countries?
Absolutely it does. I mean, the concern I've had all along is she has had 7 special access programs on these devices. Those are the most classified, sensitive secrets in the federal government, many of them covert operations. She took those devices overseas against the State Department's wishes, and now we find out, as James Comey told me previously, that it's very likely that foreign adversary nations got into her private server. This is why you have security protocols, to protect classified information. She exposed it to our enemies, and now, Steve, our adversaries have this very sensitive information that not only jeopardizes her and national security at home, but the men and women serving overseas. This is, in my opinion, quite frankly, it's treason.
Chairman, on top of that, we understand the president was communicating to that server using an alias, although he didn't tell the truth to 60 Minutes Steve Croft and others when asked when he found out about the private server. What are the implications of the president communicating with the Secretary of State on an unsecure server now that we know this hacked 5 times?
Well, now the American people know why this was such a big deal. It should be in a protected environment. It wasn't. It was created to get around the Freedom of Information Act because she didn't want to be transparent to the American people. Now it's vulnerable to a cyber attack. Looks like it was. And now countries like Russia and China and Iran have the most highly sensitive programs in the United States. And the President of the United States is communicating with her under a pseudonym. They're not stupid. They can figure that out as well. This is a huge story. It's far bigger than the accusations against Donald Trump. This goes to the heart of fitness of character to serve as commander-in-chief.
What about the president? The president's supposed to stay on the sidelines here, but then we're also learning from FBI sources that Valerie Jarrett, his chief advisor, is now asking for James Comey to be fired. And then you have the president saying, come on. He was campaigning for her, saying it was an honest mistake.
I mean, I don't think Valerie Jarrett has any credibility here. Jim Comey, I've known him for 20 years. He always does what he thinks is the right thing to do. He's made Republicans upset, but he's made a lot of Democrats upset. Yeah. One thing I know about Jim is that he will always do the right thing in his mind. I think he believed, and I think rightly so, that he had new evidence and he had an obligation to the Congress to turn that evidence over and let the Congress know and the American people before this critical decision that this case was not over. As Hillary Clinton said, I'm cleared, it's all over. Jim Comey is the hero here, coming in saying that's not the case.
Did you feel that way in July?
This investigation is still going.
Did you feel that way in July?
You know, the only criticism I had of Jim in July was that he should have said, to say no reasonable prosecutor would take the case was not the role of the FBI. That's the role of the prosecutor at Justice. And I was one of those for many years. That was the only criticism I had. He pretty much indicts her all the way up to not indicting her.
All right, Chairman, thank you for joining us this morning.
No, thanks for having me.
Is Hillary Clinton changing her strategy? Instead of talking about the issues, she's going after Donald Trump in Nevada.
Imagine with me what it would be like to have Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office come next January. What would it be like to have that person in the most powerful office in the world? What would it be like to have a president who pits people against each other, who doesn't try to pull America together? What would your life be like if he were in the White House?
More importantly, what it would be like if she was in the White House. That would be something you'd think she'd be bringing up, but she's not taking that tact. The latest CNN ORC poll puts Donald Trump ahead in the state of Nevada with a 6-point lead. It's astounding. So what are voters in the Silver State thinking? Joining us right now, a man who knows as well as anyone, longtime Nevada resident and host of The Property Man, Bob Massey. Bob, what's going on in Nevada? First on the presidential side, how has he moved ahead?
Well, I think because of the fact of what's happened, obviously, with all the emails, and I will tell you that as it relates to her words, most Nevadans will say that they'll take words over corruption. For example, Hillary, what would it look like if one day you're in the Oval Office and somebody comes in and handcuffs you for everything that you have done and continue to lie about? That's where most Nevadans are. They know that Trump said terrible things in reference to women. Nobody could condone that, Brian. They know that he has done some very stupid things. But when all comes down to is this level of corruption and cynicism and arrogance and narcissism that the Clintons continue to show, they have had it. And I will tell you, Brian, I lived through Watergate. I worked in D.C. I was a senatorial aide. I remember those days. And all too often, everybody's worried, is that what we're going to be faced with if she gets elected for the next 4 years, investigations and hearings, instead of taking care of our country?
Fascinatingly, Harry Reid's leaving. The next senator is going to be a Republican or Democrat, but not Harry Reid. And a military officer, Joe Heck, was leading. When he walked away from Donald Trump after the Billy Bush tape, he dropped in the race. Where's he stand now?
You know what? They're saying a little even. Maybe he's 2 points behind. That was a bad move on his part, Brian, because at that point Joe was about 6 points up. Now what happened is yesterday he went back and said, well, he could be a good president if he meets the constitutional guidelines. You know, Nevada is a small state, and Vegas is a small town. And the bottom line is the fact people don't like somebody that vacillates. And as a result, if you're for him, you're for him. If you're against him, you're against him. And one of the things that so many Republican friends of mine, Brian, has said to me is they're very upset with the leaders of the Republican Party that abandoned Trump and didn't support the people that elected him to run for president. You're going to see a lot of Republicans change after this election and go independent because of people like Paul Ryan who did those type of things.
We'll see what happens with Joe Heck. Could be the balance of power in the Senate, too. Bob Massey, always great to talk to you. Look forward to your series coming back after the election. Thanks so much.
Take care, Brian.
It is the president's signature bill, and it now is a hot issue out on the campaign trail as Americans watch their Obamacare premiums go through the roof. But come November, Senator Tom Cotton has a plan to fix all of this. He joins us now to explain what the plan is. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Ainsley. Great to be on with you.
Great to see you. You know, the economy is the issue, why everyone's going to the polls. At least that's what the polls are telling us. This is a big issue for families because many people can't afford these high premiums.
It's a huge issue, Ainsley. You know, President Obama promised that Obamacare would save the average family $2,500. Just last week, though, his own administration announced that premiums would go up by 25%, and that's just the start of it. A lot of these plans have deductibles of $6,000 a year or more, and for most working families around our country, that's simply not insurance. They're paying something and getting nothing in return. In fact, when you add premiums and deductibles together in Arkansas, some families would be paying what it would cost to get a mortgage on a $600,000 home.
Yeah.
And in Arkansas, that's what we call a mansion. That just goes to show that Obamacare is simply not affordable and not working for most working families.
Sure. Senator, no doubt about it, it certainly was not what we were sold initially. So tell us about your fix, the Obamacare Tax Relief and Consumer Choice Act, which you would like to see Congress pass.
So a lot of Americans are going to be in for a very rude surprise come tax season after the new year. If you can't afford your Obamacare insurance, you're going to owe the government a $700 penalty. And if you have a child that you can't afford insurance for, it's $350. So you're looking at over $2,000 for a family of four and a tax penalty because you can't afford the insurance that Obamacare made unaffordable. So my plan would say simply, if your premiums have increased by more than 10%, you should be exempt from that tax penalty. Now, ultimately, Obamacare has made our health care system worse, and we need Democrats to stop defending that law and start fixing the problem. But in the immediate term, what we need to do is give some tax relief to working families who are going to suffer because of Obamacare.
So you want that done right away. You're not saying you don't want to replace it eventually, but you say immediately that's how you want to ameliorate the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you know, our health care system was broken with a lot of problems before Obamacare. And Obamacare has made it worse. That's why we need Democrats to work with us to replace that law and fix these problems. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of Democrats who voted for the law, like Evan Bayh in Indiana and Russ Feingold in Wisconsin, who are running to come back to the Senate. I don't think the people in Indiana and Wisconsin are going to send them back when they helped create the problem. But in the immediate term, before we can finally fix our health care system, we need to make sure that working families aren't paying $2,000 or more in a tax penalty because of Obamacare.
Especially when you consider most people don't even have $1,000 in savings. I heard that statistic recently.
Backup.
No.
Yeah. Senator, before you go, we wanted you to weigh in on the big story. Bret Baier's got two sources inside the FBI that says that the FBI has been looking into the Clinton Foundation for over a year, and apparently an indictment is possible, barring some obstruction in some way from the Department of Justice or something internal at the FBI. Curious for your reaction.
Well, the more we learn about the Clinton Foundation's operations, whether it's from the book Clinton Cash or Bret Baier's reporting or the Wall Street Journal's reporting, the more it becomes clear that the Clinton Foundation may be the world's largest money laundering and influence peddling operation. And in fact, with two investigations swirling around Hillary Clinton, both the email investigation and the Clinton Foundation investigation, I think it may become clear that those are really the same controversy. One reason why Hillary Clinton probably wanted to set up a private email server is so she could advance her pay-to-play agenda at the State Department for Clinton Foundation donors, giving perks and benefits to dictators and shady oligarchs all around the world.
How do you think if that is indeed the case, and you know you're running for president, how could you possibly think you're going to get away with that? Senator, it's just an unbelievable 5 days into the election, and I don't even know what shoe could drop next. Thanks so much for putting on your vest, almost zipping it up, and joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Senator.
Disgraced DNC Chair Donna Brazile fired for leaking debate questions to Hillary Clinton while she was working and drawing a paycheck from CNN. So why isn't CNN investigating this? Joining us right now is Fox News contributor and New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Steve.
Are you surprised that she was leaking questions to her pal Hillary Clinton?
Well, recall all this was going on in the primary season, and Bernie Sanders was continually complaining that the DNC had rigged the primary process against him. We found out just before the Democratic convention through WikiLeaks that, in fact, they had been rigging it. And then we find out through WikiLeaks now about Donna Brazile asking questions. Sure. We also find out about other reporters and columnists through the emails of John Podesta, basically helping the Clinton campaign, advising the Clinton campaign, sending stories to the Clinton campaign for approval before they're published. So I think we've learned a lot about this confederacy between left-wing media members and the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And it's a huge embarrassment for the guy who runs CNN, because his employee, who he hired, Donna Brazil, leaking the questions out there. And CNN is not going to have a investigation, no investigation into figuring out who exactly leaked her the question.
Right. I mean, the whole idea that WikiLeaks has, in effect, done CNN's work for it, but then CNN doesn't want to do any more. I mean, when you just follow back the trail, Donna Brazil was not involved in the preparation of the debate questions.
Right.
So somebody who was gave them to Donna Brazil. There's no other way. Donna Brazil is not a journalist. She didn't ferret these things out, and then she sent them to the Clinton campaign. I would just say, too, Steve, it's interesting, the Clinton campaign never said no. They were happy to cheat. They were happy to cheat.
You know, right now, Michael, the polls are tight, but the coverage is lopsided. It's all about Donald Trump is a terrible person, the worst person ever to run for president of the United States, and we can't explain why they're tied.
Yeah, right. Day after day, and I single out the New York Times again, because of the headlines on the front page read like editorials. In fact, they use the same language that the editorials use.
Well, that's because the boss there said it's okay to inject your opinion in reporting, which is never done.
They have totally trashed all their standards. There's no pretense anymore. One study showed that on the 3 major broadcast nightly news, 91% of the coverage of Trump was hostile. Hostile. Not negative, but hostile. I mean, that is the atmosphere in which this campaign is being conducted, where all of the media forces primarily, or almost all of them, have ganged up on one side to try to pick a president, not because of public will, because the polls are close, but despite public will.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, well, people are watching. They remember it was lopsided.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Michael, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
All right, more bombshells coming out about the Justice Department and Hillary Clinton as it relates to the whole WikiLeaks investigation, as well, or drops, as well as what's happening with the FBI investigation. Here with the late-breaking details and what they mean about a man who worked for the Justice Department. This is a great guy to go to for this, is J. Christian Adams, former DOJ employee. Christian, first off, when you hear about these WikiLeaks that reveal that there was some dialogue between Peter Kanzik and John Podesta, what do you think about that? Tipping off about 12 hours before actual testimony would take place.
Yeah, and it's just astonishing, Brian. If I did this when I was at the Justice Department voting section, tipping off the Trump or the McCain campaign about a pleading we are about to file in court, a court document, and giving them a heads up ahead of time, I would have lost my job. But here's the Assistant Attorney General communicating with Podesta and somebody else communicating with the Clinton campaign itself to tip them off that a court document is about to be filed about the State Department emails and how long it was going to take to get them out in the public. It's extremely important information, and that's totally insider trading to give them that heads up.
Here it is. Here's the actual document, and it's not been denied, although it was hacked. There is a HGC oversight hearing today, Hillary, where the head of our civil division will testify, likely to get questions on State Department emails. So other people have speculated, well, it's only a few hours heads up. What's the big deal? The other side didn't have a heads up on this.
Well, that's about the congressional testimony, and that's not as big of a deal as the court document. Remember, Brian, lawyers have an ethical obligation, including Justice Department lawyers, to not disclose confidential information to third parties. When they called the Clinton campaign and told them that a court document was going to be filed that they needed to look at, they needed to use, respond to, integrate into their campaign, that's a violation of their ethical duties to tip them off about those court proceedings.
Jay, I should call you Christian. Tell me right now, what do you think is going on between the Justice Department and the FBI as it relates to these emails? Because evidently the tension has never been higher between them. Is this something that even surprises you?
Well, a little bit. You know, what surprises me is the fight in the FBI agents who are really going to the mat to do justice. It's the Justice Department lawyers who have turned the Justice Department into a wing of the Democratic National Committee. Their job, they see it, is to stop prosecutions of politicians they like Hillary Clinton, to get in the way of justice, to stop criminal proceedings.
But, Christian, the reason why you're talking to me is because that wasn't okay with you. I understand there's also people in the Justice Department who aren't okay with this.
Yeah, thank heavens we have people who still have principles, despite the efforts of the last 7 years. This is a situation, Brian, where lawyers view themselves as political operatives at DOJ from top to bottom. And this is why we can't get justice when it comes to Hillary.
J. Christian Adams, thanks so much. Whistleblowers come forward.
They're starting to see the reaction in the markets. The S&P 500 down for 7 straight sessions, longest losing streak in 5 years. Joining me right now is the Wall Street Journal's chief economics correspondent, John Hilsenrath, along with Korn Ferry Vice Chairman Alan Guarino. Good to see you both, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
John, what do you make of these moves? Is the market reacting to the uncertainty of the election?
I think it certainly is. The investors don't like uncertainty. It looked like a week or two ago Hillary had this thing in the bag, and now it's not at all clear that she does, and I think markets are pricing that in by selling off.
And Alan, the broader story of the economy is not great. We've got the jobs number out tomorrow, although we did get a pretty good GDP number last week.
Good GDP number. The job situation has been sort of a stealth weak recovery. It creates this image that we have low unemployment, which is true, but we've had the worst wage growth among the G20 post this recession. And if you look at Korn Ferry's Hay Group data, you'll find that on an inflation-adjusted basis, people are actually making less money today than they did pre-recession.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen that data go all the way back into the early 80s where people are making less money now. But I think the biggest thing we have after the election is the Fed. And, you know, in December, do we get a rate hike? And if we do, what happens? If you remember last year into January, the market had a huge sell-off when the Fed hiked just 1/4 of a point. So if we're definitely getting a rate hike, what effect does that have on the market?
Well, you know, we've actually recruited 2 Fed presidents over the last decade.
That's right. Pat Harker's your latest one, right?
Exactly. And so it's a double mandate, right? Inflation, they have to protect us from inflation, and they have to promote job growth. Well, job growth looks good if you look at the headline number. But the fact of the matter is inflation is driven by people spending lots of money because they're highly employed. The numbers don't bear that out. We have some charts that will show you that we are at a very weak level of wage recovery. So yes, they're going to work, but they don't have a lot of spending power. So where do we get inflation?
Right, right.
You know, one of the points I'd like to make about the Fed is this cycle this year is a little bit different than last year. We had a huge run-up in the dollar going into last year's rate increase. We had a lot of turbulence in China. This time around, I think markets have figured it out that the Fed is going to do one, but they're not going to do a lot after that. And as a result, I mean, the dollar's a little bit stronger than it was a few months ago, but not that much. It's pretty stable, and we're not hearing a lot of noise out of China right now, which I think suggests that the markets have priced this in. I think they can digest a rate increase by the Fed in December.
John, did you hear anything yesterday from the Fed? Obviously, they left interest rates unchanged. We were expecting that. Janet Yellen said that a raise in rates is likely before the end of the year, so we were expecting that as well. What was your takeaway from what we heard yesterday from the Fed 2-day meeting?
Well, the one thing that really struck me is that they're starting to see glimmerings of inflation picking up. You know, inflation has been below their target for 53 straight months, almost 5 years going now, and they're starting to see some signs that it's picking up, and that's another reason why they want to move. So there were several references in their statements to seeing a little bit of inflation out there, and that might lead to the kind of wage growth that we're saying has been missing, and certainly has been missing in this expansion.
I wanted to point out something. It was a note I got from Sam Stovall yesterday at S&P that the S&P 500 was down 2.2% in the 3 months prior to October 31st. So from July through October, from late July through October, which implies a Republican victory this election cycle.
Wow.
Because if you go back and look since 1944, the S&P has fallen during those three months, and the incumbent person or party has been replaced 86% of the time. There was only one exception in '56 during the Suez Canal crisis. But I just thought that was really interesting. And they don't think, S&P does not think that a Trump victory is factored into the markets at this point, and they do expect a sell-off. If you want to do next week.
I think you got to throw out a lot of those metrics and predictors of, you know, of who's going to win this election, because this whole election cycle has been so unpredictable. You know, a year ago, who would have said that Donald Trump would have been the nominee? Who would have said that these email revelations would have come out and FBI reviewing its investigation a week before the election? I just think, you look at these stock market predictors, and it's just very hard to hang much on them right now.
Yeah, I agree. I just thought it was interesting.
It is.
Hey, John, it's Mike Murphy. I have a question. Since this rally really began, we talked about what's bad news is actually good news. Bad economic news means lower rates for longer, which is good for the stock market, so you can keep buying without any sort of major correction. If the Fed's going to raise and has to raise, and that's in the face of not great or not very strong economic data, I think that is the worst setup for the stock market. Can you speak to that?
Well, I actually would take a slightly different spin on that. I think in this case the market has priced in that the Fed is moving, and the Fed has been very, very deliberate about saying that they're not going to do much after that. So I think we could, when we see if we see good jobs numbers tomorrow, I think that the market will take that in stride in terms of the Fed and say, hey, maybe this economy is finally starting to grow a little bit faster.
So the estimate's 175,000 jobs created in the month of October. The unemployment rate expected to go to 4.9%. Alan, you're in the thick of things every day. You're placing people in white-collar jobs, and you really get a good sense of how things feel. Characterize the jobs picture for us right now.
I think, as I've said in the past, we're in a new normal situation. So we don't have a big, powerful, robust job market, but we don't have a declining job market either. So I think it's sort of steady as you go.
Yeah.
I think 175 is safe. I think 200,000 to the upside and surprise is potentially possible. But I think it's a sort of steady, kind of very shallow growth as we move forward in terms of non-farm payroll.
But when you place people in jobs, where do you see the opportunities? What areas?
Yeah, so interesting. So first of all, for the first time probably in the last, since the recovery, large corporates are doing more hiring than small and mid-sized businesses. So that speaks well for potential wage growth, because big companies tend to pay more than smaller companies, the kind of folks they hire. So that's one thing.
What, like consulting, lawyers, what?
Well, and then in terms of the industries, consulting, lawyers, and so on and so forth, professional services, leisure and hospitality, interesting, and healthcare. Energy, still bouncing along, having a hard time.
And mining has been shedding jobs now for a long time, mining and manufacturing as well. John Hilsenrath, Alan Guarino, good to see you both.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Joining us right now, Wisconsin Republican Congressman Sean Duffy. Congressman, good to see you.
Hey, good morning, Maria. Thanks for having me on.
What do you think is most important for the people of Wisconsin? Do you believe that 6% are still undecided at this point, 5 days to go?
No, I don't. So in Wisconsin, you look at the Marquette poll, that is the gold standard of polling in our state. But if you look at this poll, what happened, a couple days of polling took place before the Friday bombshell that came from the FBI last week, number one. But number two, they oversampled Democrats by 6 percentage points. So I do think Hillary's winning in Wisconsin, but not by 6 points. Maybe it's a 2 or 3 vote or percentage margin for her. But I think this state's going to be it's going to be tight. But I think what's really important in our state, as you look to the Senate, Ron Johnson is within 1 point of Russ Feingold. So many people across the country, out in Washington, D.C., they wrote off our Senate race. This is going to be a horse race, and especially if you look at how that poll was done, I think Ron Johnson is actually up a little bit. And what we're seeing in Wisconsin is this great tradition of ticket splitting. You'll see some who will vote for Hillary Clinton, but also they want to check and balance, and so they'll go vote for Ron Johnson as well. So we're not out of it here in Wisconsin, but again, Clinton has a lead. I'm surprised, Maria, as we've heard all morning talking about polling, how close Colorado is, though, and Michigan and Pennsylvania. If I was on the Trump team looking at polls, I might go, hey, these are some really great plays in this last 5 days before the election. You got to pick off one of these blue states. If you're going to get to 270. Wisconsin might be one of those states, but you got great opportunity in some traditionally blue states as well.
Yeah. Sean, Congressman, it's Dagan McDowell. In terms of the polls tightening in the Johnson-Russ Feingold race, the Wall Street Journal actually wrote an entire article about that very thing. And do you think that Obamacare and the premium increases and the diminishing lack of choice in that is hurting Russ Feingold, because he was the final vote in the Senate that signed off on Obamacare? And is he getting hammered on that in Wisconsin?
He's getting slaughtered. Listen, in Wisconsin, you're seeing 20 to 30% increases from last year to this year, just like you are across the country. Different parts of the state have different increases. But Russ Feingold was aggressive in his support for Obamacare, but he made the ultimate sin. He made the same promises on Obamacare that Barack Obama did. He said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And if you have a family of 4 on average, the cost of your insurance will go down by $2,500 a year. We all have seen that to be false. And in Wisconsin, we like people who are trustworthy. Whether we like the news or not, you got to level with us. People look at Russ Feingold lying to them. Ron Johnson is running great ads holding Russ to account for the vote in support of Obamacare. So this is playing hard here.
Hey, Congressman, as you're starting to see some of the down-ballot races kind of lean Republican, is there any way that you could see that over the next 5 days coming up to help Donald Trump? So people saying, you know, I like this Republican senator, so therefore I'm going to vote Republican in the main race also?
It can, but I think you see a difference in the minds of the voter. They see Donald Trump as one entity. He's kind of a unique or different Republican, and then they see their traditional Republican candidate as something else. So I'm not sure that you know, Donald Trump's going to help lift up Republicans in certain areas, or down ballot Republicans are going to lift up Donald Trump. You see a lot of folks running their own races, and successfully so. And that's why I think a lot of our senators are doing so well in states that that Trump might not be doing so well in. We have some House members where Mr. Trump is down by, you know, 15, 18 points in their districts, but they're actually winning by a couple points because there is this distinction, and people are looking at the person as opposed to the party.
Well, what about Wisconsin being one of the states allowing voters to change their ballots? If voting at the polls or absentee, they are allowed to cancel their ballot if they think they made the wrong choice. I know Trump has been on the campaign trail saying, look, now we got this new information from the FBI last Friday. If you want to change your vote, what's your take on that? Is it going to move anybody to change their vote?
Maria, this is the first I had heard about our ability to change our votes in Wisconsin. You can do it up to 3 times. But when Mr. Trump was here a couple days ago, he made sure that everyone in Wisconsin knew that if you made a mistake and voted for Hillary Clinton, you don't want someone who is crooked or corrupt or could be indicted by the FBI, you still have time to change your vote. I think it's been an interesting news cycle and campaign in that all this new information comes out, not just about Mr. Trump, but about Mrs. Clinton. And this is probably one of the first election cycles that someone wouldn't be locked in, and as new information comes in, we have politicians saying, you can still change your vote, go on in and you can switch from Hillary over to me, Donald. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of people do that, though. I think those who voted early were pretty well locked in on who they wanted to support. We'll see.
What about the voter fraud story? Wisconsin reportedly deploying election integrity teams at the polls to make sure that there is no misconduct or wrongful denial of the right to vote. What's going on in Wisconsin in terms of watching these machines and making sure that there isn't voter fraud?
Yeah, Maria, I don't want your viewers to think that because Donald Trump has said that this could be a rigged election, our Department of Justice, our Attorney General is deploying, you know, this new team to watch our elections in Wisconsin. We've done this since 2004. And our Attorney General gets his team together. He deploys them around the state. And again, we want to make sure that our vote totals are accurate. They reflect the number of people and the votes that are cast in our state. And so you hear other places, you look at Chicago where you have a lot more dead people voting. In Wisconsin, we want to make sure that this is accurate and true. And so since 2004, our Department of Justice goes out and makes sure that the voting system is running correctly. So not a really big story. I'm happy we do that here. And I think more states should take this very seriously and make sure they have public officials, whether they're attorneys or high-level law enforcement officers, on the ground just watching to make sure there's no funny business, there's no shenanigans as Americans go to the ballot box and pick the next president.
I think there's just a consensus that it doesn't really matter with all of this email stuff, which I kind of agree with because people have made up their mind. They already know she's so shady, but I really can't believe people don't care. Really makes me sad.
Listen, I think they do care. I think the drip, drip, drip of not just WikiLeaks, but the new information that there may be an indictment with the Clinton Foundation that's come from the FBI. Right. I don't think Americans want to move forward. They want to focus on the economy and their jobs. They want to focus on ISIS. We don't want to have another, 4 years of Clinton scandals where there's lawsuits and indictments and past bad acts that come into play. We want to clear the slate, look forward, and start to focus on policy that's going to grow the economy. I don't want to deal with the corruption of past bad acts from the Clinton Foundation. And if she wins, make no mistake, that is going to drive the conversation in America as opposed to the families in America who have been suffering under 8 years of the Obama economy.
And I ask this as a question, but are people increasingly going to have to look at that ticket when normally the vice presidential pick does not matter, and look at Clinton-Kaine and say, well, I could be stuck with Kaine at some point in the next 4 years?
I'd prefer that to Hillary.
That's a question.
By the way, I just want to point out, Adam Shapiro reported this. Go ahead, Congressman.
I was going to say, after that last debate between the vice presidents, I'm not sure I want Kaine either. Both Clinton and Kaine, I think, are bad for the economy and growth.
Congressman, thank you very much. Just want to point out, in terms of the voter fraud story, Adam Shapiro did report yesterday that the Republican Party of Florida is accusing election officials of voter fraud in a key county, that's Broward County, which includes Fort Lauderdale. So we talk about this being, a story. Well, there is some evidence of it, and Adam Shapiro reported it yesterday.